Today we finish up a series on what we believe by looking at a topic of human life, As I was preparing and studying for this message this week, I struggled to find the correct words to say. And then the Holy Spirit spoke into my spirit, helping me kind of understand a little bit about what really was the issue. It wasn't about being politically correct through trying to use the right words and not wanting to offend anybody. But it was more about something else. But before I go any further, it's important that I give you another public address announcement, if you will. Be sure that you listen to the full message today before you rush to any judgments. Because the first part might sound offensive to some people, and then the second part they may enjoy. Then the first part people may like, and then the last part may offend somebody. So I'm probably going to offend somebody at some point during this message, so you can talk to me later. But listen to the full message before you rush to too many judgments. So let's start with prayer. Jesus, I just pray that as we look at the preciousness, the sacredness of life, that you would just speak into us and help us to see where we may not fully understand life. Help us to be open to receiving from you today and looking beyond just what we may know. I pray that you would hide me behind the cross, that you would speak through me, that it would be your words and not mine, I pray, Jesus. Amen. The passage that came to my mind as I was struggling to find the right words was in John chapter 1. It says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." Skipping down to 16. It says, out of his fullness, so out of Jesus, out of his fullness, we have received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So as we're looking at this topic of human life, I want us to look through the lens of grace and truth. Because there's some truth about life that is hard for some of us. And if we focus just on the truth, we become radicals. And if we are full of grace, we end up not educating people on the true reality of how precious we are. So we're going to look at this a little balanced today. So we start out looking at truth. We might as well get some of the hard stuff out of the way. So we're looking at truth, and the truth is life is sacred. In Genesis 1:27, it says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them." God literally created you. If God took the time to create you, and he knows everything about you, how precious are we? How valuable are we? But wait a second. God created animals. God created the universe. He created the trees. He created the grass, the sky. He created all of these things. But there's one thing that it says that he created in his image. And that is you and I. He created us like him. Jeremiah 1:5. It says, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. Before you were even a thought in your mom and dad's eyes, God knew you. How precious are you? Psalm 127:3 says, children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. That it's a reward to us as parents and adults, that it's a reward to have a child in our homes. But life isn't always easy to understand how precious it is. Because there's this topic, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called abortion. You might not have heard of it yet, but more than likely you have. And it's a hard topic. It's a hard topic to cover because there's so many different elements in it. As I was sitting down one evening and I was talking to Jennifer about some of the things that I was learning and studying, I became so wrapped up in the truth that I found myself contradicting myself over and over and over. And Jennifer was like, but you did this just the other day, or you did this. And I'm like, stop it. But it was true. I was contradicting myself left and right. Because I want to say abortion is wrong. But there are some people where it endangers the mother's life. So what then? Or now we're deciding whose life should be worth more. And I couldn't imagine being in that situation. With Samantha, whenever Jennifer had contractions, Samantha's heart rate would just plummet. And so within seconds, it seemed like they had her prepped and they were taking her away. And I'm watching her go down the hallway, and the first thing that comes to my mind was, oh no, what's going to happen to her? I couldn't imagine having to be in a situation where I had to be asked the question, do we save the child or do we save your wife? Luckily, it didn't come down to that. I kind of knew the answer before I asked the other night. I'm a little late in asking since we're not having any more kids, but I asked Jennifer, I said, so what would you have had me say? She said, save the baby. Save the baby. I knew that was going to be her answer. She said, she explained it this way, and it gave me a little more insight into a mother. She said, you know, if a car's coming, I'm not going to push my child out in front of it. I'm going to get in between. I'm going to block my child. I'm going to protect my child. So of course, my child, save my child. But unfortunately, not all people feel that way. You see, because abortion laws are really set around what's in the best interest of the mother. You know, if you kill a woman and she's pregnant, you can get charged with 2 murders. If a mother neglects her self-care when she is pregnant, for example, if she takes drugs, she's a drug addict, she can be charged crimes against her child that isn't born. But yet, a mother can decide to end a pregnancy whenever. You see, these 2 laws, they're actually biblical. In Exodus chapter 21, Verses 22 through 25, it says, if people are fighting and hit a pregnant woman and she gives birth prematurely, but there is no serious injury, the offender must be fined whatever the woman's husband demands and the court allows. But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. So why would God create a law like this if a child was not a person? If a child was not equal to someone outside the womb, per se? But you see, really, the laws are all about the viability of a child. In all the research that I've done this last week, I could not find anything that talked about the fetus as a living being. It was only, when can the child live outside the mother's womb? That's the important factor. When can a child live outside the mother's womb? Never does it talk about the fetus being a living being. So let's look at the preciousness of life. One cell, one tiny microscopic cell is formed as one cell from your mother is joined by one cell from your father. They come together, each carrying 23 chromosomes. 23 chromosomes from your mother and 23 chromosomes from your father. And they come together and they begin to form one cell. So two cells merge and they become one. The one cell from your mom is carrying half of her genetic code. One cell from your father is carrying half of his genetic code, and they come together and they begin to form one genetic DNA code that is unlike any other before. Using 4 nucleotides, if you will, they begin to write out this 3 billion character DNA creation of you. This DNA literally tells the world who you are. And as it writes out this 3 billion character code, it is literally writing out who you will be and who you are. And it's unique. There's no other person like you. There's no one in the world that has ever been in all of humanity that has the same 3 billion character code that you have. So from the very beginning, from that one cell, you have life. Because before something can grow, it has to be what? Living. It has to be living for something to grow. Scientists say that if you were to stretch out this 3 billion character DNA code, it would be approximately 6 feet long. If I were to start now, and I were to read your DNA code from beginning to end, reading 1 character per second, it would take me 96 years just to read the description of you. 6 feet. If I were to read that DNA code of you. And when they read out this DNA code, they find this picture of beauty that has never been before written in all of history or humankind, that you are created unique. That one cell sets out on a mission to do the unimaginable, to create you. This may not be in your family album, but this is an embryo. This is a 16 cells into life. It's literally on the tip of a safety pin, magnified significantly number of times. But this is a 3-day-old embryo. Now 16 cells on its way to being your 75 trillion cells that make up who you are now. But here's the thing that's really cool. 16 cells, but each one of those cells holds your 3 billion character DNA code. Every single cell carries your DNA. You have so much DNA inside your body right now that if you stretched it out, you could go all the way to the moon and back. 1,700 times. 178,000 times. To the moon and back, 178,000 times. And when I told you that, 50,000 of those cells died. And they were replaced by 50,000 new cells. And 50,000 new cells just died and were replaced by 50,000 new cells. Every 3 seconds, 50,000 cells of you die and are replaced with 50,000 new cells. This is you. 5 months in. 5-month-old child right now. The human eye. Any scientist will tell you, any medical doctor will tell you, the most technically advanced thing in the world is the human eye. At around 5 months of being in your mother's womb, 1 million optic nerve endings left the optic nerve center of your brain, heading for another 1 million optic nerves that were sent from your eye. And this 1 million that was sent from the optic nerve center in your brain is searching for its partner of 1 million that was sent from your eye. And they have to find each other and match up. And when they matched up for the very first time, you had sight. However, you couldn't see anything because there was this small technical problem. It's called your eyelid. You just had a piece of skin that covered your eye. But when you are born, you can open your eyes. There's a cut. So around 6 months being in the womb, this magic, if you will, this magic blade just happens to come across your eye and cut that piece of skin. And for the very first time, you have eyelids. No one can explain it. It just happens. I can. It's called God. God knows every intricate part. He knew what you needed when you were created. And I thought about this. But wait a second, I know people who have characteristics that aren't normal. That there was something that went wrong. That maybe one eye was lower than the other. Maybe part of their face droops, or something. There's some malfunction, if you will. So did God mess up? No. God knew exactly what he was doing. He created you as beautiful as anyone else. Because in his sight, the only person that matters is you. You are the perfect creation from God. Augustine once said, "Men go abroad to wonder at the height of mountains, at the huge waves of the sea, at the long courses of the rivers and the vast compass of the ocean, at the circular motion of the stars, but yet they pass by themselves every day without wondering." You don't have to go far to see the first wonder of the world. Forget the 7 others. The first wonder is human creation. That God did create us with purpose. That he did plan for each and every child that was created in the mother's womb to be born. Because it says that he literally created you with the purpose when you were born. When were you born? The moment you became that one cell in your mother's womb. You were precious. So we have people who have abortions. And we get angry at them. You know, whenever I think about this topic, I think of one thing, and holding my 12-week-old child in my hand. And you know, one of the first things that came to my mind was, how could anyone ever say that this was not precious in a living being? And my first thought in my mind is to be angry at anyone that would say this is not a child, this is not something precious from God, and that they would kill something like this. But you see, that's just truth. That's just explaining part of the story. But remember, Jesus said, "I came full of grace and truth." To the people that he would be talking to that may be considering an abortion, he would tell them the truth, that life is sacred, that you were created with a purpose, that this child was meant for life. He would tell them that. But what about the people who have an abortion? Who have had an abortion? What do we do? It's grace. It's love and support and mercy. You see, because I came across some other troubling things as I studied this week. We're not doing our job. Let me read you a couple quotes. This is from a woman who's pro-choice. Once a woman decides to have an abortion, she has to try to cope with her experiences and her emotions on her own. I wish the woman could share their stories openly without fear of being judged by society. Abortion is such a hot topic, and there are many people shouting loudly on both sides of the argument. Sadly, the one voice you never hear, and perhaps the voice that is the most important, is the woman who had an abortion. We're so busy yelling and contradicting and judging that person that we don't stop and listen to them. Here's a woman that's pro-life. It says, I might have found healing years earlier, had I not been so terrified of the church. Had I been able to address the pain emotionally, maybe then I would have been able to face the spiritual side of this. Why is it important? Why is it important that we care for people, regardless of their decision to have an abortion or not? Because we can't change the past, can we? We can't go back and put the baby back in the mother's womb. We can't do that. So what can we do? We can love them. Not what they did, but we can love them. Let me give you a few reasons why it's important. Women who have had an abortion are 3 times more likely than any other childbearing woman in the general population to commit suicide. If you have an abortion, the likelihood that you'll commit suicide is 3 times greater than a woman who has a natural birth. Teen girls aren't 3 times, they're 10 times more likely to commit suicide than their counterpart. Two out of three women who have a late abortion, so after 12 weeks, suffer from clinical definition of PTSD. 2 out of 3. A 110%. 100% is the most you can get here. 110% that have increased risk of alcohol abuse who have abortions. Why? Why did they turn to alcohol? Why did they turn to drugs to cope with things? Because they haven't been able to share. They haven't been able to grieve over what they're feeling. I found one website that was talking about abortions and said that women do not experience any side effects after having an abortion. Like, have you stopped and listened to any of them? At the very least, they'll suffer from depression. Why? Because whether they wanted that child or not, they were putting an end to a living being. And whether they want to admit it openly or not, subconsciously, they know. In the deepest part of their mind, they know that they killed a living child. In Indiana, a woman who is considering having an abortion has to go through no counseling to make their decision. They don't even have to be told about what will potentially happen to them, the risks that face them on the other side of having an abortion. In the state of Indiana, if you have an abortion, you are required to have no counseling after you have an abortion. But yet they tell us that the laws are in place for the best interest of the mother. Are they? Because I'm inclined to say no. Because life is sacred. And here's the thing that I want to be very clear about. If I don't know all of your stories, so I'm just throwing this all out there. If you've had an abortion, if you considered having an abortion, if you know someone who has had one or considered it, I cast no judgment. Because we can't change the past. It's happened. I'm not a woman. I can't tell you what's going through a woman's mind when all of these things are going on. But I can tell you this, that it's our job to love them regardless of their decision. It's our job to give them a place where they can openly share their feelings. Why am I passionate about this? Well, I told you the one story of Samantha. No, not Samantha, BJ, our niece named the 12-week-old baby Jones, so we call him BJ. I told you that story. But every so often you see this little guy running around. He kind of looks like me a little bit. Kaylin. That was an option for her. She considered having an abortion. Immediately, I did everything legally that I could possibly do to stop her. So she wanted to give him up for adoption without my consent. So I did everything legally I could to stop her. Because I'll admit, I was in over my head. I didn't have the slightest clue how to be a father. But I knew that I made the choice to sleep with his mom. And the moment I did that, I was saying that I'm willing to be the father of this child. Granted, we did not set out to do that, but it happened. So I had one job to do, and that is to raise that child. Not to kill the child, not to give it to someone else to do, but that was my job. Am I saying that adoption is not a legitimate thing that should happen in some circumstances? No, I'm not saying that. It is a thing, it's an important aspect of raising a child that I believe is important. But ending the life of a child should not be an option. Do we give life an opportunity? Do we give people the opportunity to share what's deep inside them and not be judged for it? I don't think so. I feel like the church is full of truth, but not willing to accept people when they make a mistake. Are we willing to love people regardless of their past? Because Jesus is. Jesus is willing. Jesus wouldn't just walk up to a woman and say, you know what, this is wrong. You cannot do this. But then if they turn around and they do it anyway, he would walk up to that person and he would do one thing. He would grab them and draw them in close and wrap his arms around them and say, I love you anyways. I do not love what you did. And I will hold you accountable for what you did. His love is not dependent on the punishment just disappearing. There are consequences to our actions. I'm not going to even start to begin to stand up here and tell you what those consequences would be because I have no clue. But God knows, and that's between you and God. But he would still embrace that mother and love them regardless. For us to be the church, we have to be full of grace and truth. We have to. You see, because I'm convinced of something. Planned Parenthood exists because the church has failed. Planned Parenthood exists because we were not a place that people could turn to. We were not a place where people could come and share their struggles and know the value of life because they weren't taught. They were just condemned. So they turned away from the church and they went to other places that would take care of things. It's time for us to be the church. It's time for us to stop judging each other and love each other for who we are. Look past each other's mistakes and failures and see who God sees them as. As we come to a table today to celebrate communion, we come and we celebrate communion because Jesus, when he was sitting around a table with his disciples, he told them to do this in remembrance of me. Not just Jesus, but also the sacrifice that he paid on the cross for our sins. And so we come to this table and we share in the body and the blood of Christ, and we do this to celebrate the life that we've been given. To celebrate the life that maybe needs to be renewed. Maybe we haven't realized how precious we are in God's sight. And so we need to push aside all the things that we've been told and all the things that maybe we've told ourselves, and we need to come as God sees us. I love this. I was reminded this week of something we need. You know what the church needs to be? I was watching, I just lost the name of the show. What was the name of the show, Jennifer? The Skinny Mirror. Shark Tank. Shark Tank. One of the ladies comes before them with this invention of the skinny mirror. You look in this mirror and it makes you look thinner. Thankfully, she got turned down by all of them. But you know, we need a God mirror. When we can look in front of the mirror and we can see who we are. But wait, we have a God mirror. Just look in your mirror at home. Because you're precious. But see, the most important thing is that the church needs to be that God mirror. We need to let people in this community stand up and look in the mirror and see who they are as precious in God's sight. As created with a purpose, with meaning. And so we come to a table where God is showing us that mirror. Because he sits around a group of disciples that were messed up, confused people about what was going on, but yet it was in their hands to spread the gospel, the good news to the world. And we're here today because of those 12 men. And Jesus, most importantly Jesus. And so we come to a table today. So I invite us to receive the body and blood of Christ today. And as you receive the body and blood of Christ, I want you to do one thing today. I want you to thank God for who he created you to be. And I want you to do another thing. I want you to promise God that you will be nothing short of who God created you to be.